Alright. In this video, I want to talk about rapture stories throughout the Bible to show how there is a rapture before the wrath of God is poured out. Because, see, we're appointed unto salvation, not unto wrath. And the first story is about the flood. The flood is the wrath of God. And a lot of people focus on Noah, but they lose sight of Enoch. Because Enoch had a child, and his child was named, I believe, Methuselah, which means that when he dies, it shall come. And when Methuselah died, the wrath of God came. And you could see that Enoch had faith. That might have been faith that the wrath was coming. We read about in Hebrews that he pleased God, and you can't please God without faith. And this faithful one, which is how the church is supposed to be, full of faith, because there's nothing we can actually see and tangibly grab a hold of, raptured up. He was taken to heaven. And then Noah, he has to mix faith with works and build the ark. He has to have faith that what God told him is true, and he has to have faith that his works protect him as he goes through what's to come. Because if he didn't do the works, he just went by faith, well, he would have died. And nobody would be here to know about it. Well, except for God and the angels and whatnot. We wouldn't be here. There wouldn't be any men alive to know about it. So we see a dispensation there. Because that's what you see throughout the Bible. You'll see the dispensation. Ultimately, everyone is saved by faith, but there's a time where faith and works are required by God, and then there's a time where it's simply just faith. We can see with the Old Covenant at Mount Sinai, it was about faith plus works. And then after Jesus died for everybody, it was just about faith. And the period of grace where we can just accept God by faith is almost up. And then Jacob's trouble will be upon us, and the wrath of God will be about to be poured out. But there'd probably be a time of peace where people can build the ark. The ones who are not raptured, they can be building that ark because they know, oh, that's when they say peace and safety. That's when sudden destruction comes upon them. So you're going to have some time to build the ark, just like Noah. And then you'll be protected throughout the tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble, the wrath of God. And then we see this story played out again in Genesis when we get to the end where it talks about Joseph. Joseph is a representation of Jesus. You see, Joseph was sold into slavery by his brother, just as Jesus was sold by one of his brethren, and he was to be crucified. Joseph ends up becoming second in all of Egypt, number 2 to the Pharaoh. And this would be a representation of the Pharaoh being the father and Joseph being the son, Jesus Christ. And there's a time where the Pharaoh has a dream about 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. And in that time, before the 7 years of famine, Joseph marries an Egyptian woman, a Gentile, even though he himself is a Jew, a Hebrew. That's a depiction of before the wrath, Jesus marries a Gentile, the church, as the church is referred to as his bride. And that marriage happens before the time of famine. And during that time of famine, who comes back into the picture? Well, God's not working with the nations anymore. He's not working with just the Egyptians. He's focused on his family, the Jews, the Hebrews, the Israelites. So Joseph's family comes in to get their food, and he rejoices to be back with them, even though they betrayed him. Right? They betrayed him, but even though they betrayed him, God glorified him. Just like they betrayed Jesus, and then God glorifies Jesus. Right? So you see the whole connection played out here. And it's the Jews who have to come to Jesus during the time of Jacob's trouble to be fed, because they can't get food any other way. And then we have, I skipped over a story in Genesis. We got 2 or 3 witnesses just in Genesis alone, right? We got Sodom and Gomorrah with Lot. Lot is described as a faithful, godly man, even though you can point out a lot of his sins. Just read Peter. I don't remember if it's 1st, 2nd Peter refers to Lot as a just, righteous, godly man, because he had faith. Just like Abraham, he believed God and it was accounted to him as righteousness for just believing God. And Lot, he was in Sodom. And the angel told him that he can't do anything until he is taken out of the way. So he takes his family and gets out of Dodge. And then wrath is poured out upon Sodom and Gomorrah. So there again we see a rapture. The next one is Elijah and Elisha. I know it sounds the same. One's with a J, one's with an S. Elijah and Elisha. They're 2 prophets. And a whirlwind comes and takes up Elijah into heaven. And then Elisha weeps, but he's given a double portion of the spirit that was given onto Elijah, and he goes and does more miracles than Elijah ever did. There we see again the rapture. Elijah is the church being taken up. Elisha is Israel staying on earth, and goes and does these miracles throughout the time of Jacob's trouble. As we read in Revelation, the 2 witnesses, right? And the 144,000. So, after that, we have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel. In the book of Daniel, in chapter 3, we read about Nebuchadnezzar building a statue in defiance to God, because he had a dream about a statue that represented time, where his head was of gold on the statue and represented the kingdom of Babylon, which Nebuchadnezzar was the king of, and he wanted his kingdom to last forever. But in the dream, the chest and arms were of silver, which was the Medo-Persian empire that was going to come and conquer him. Well, conquer his kingdom, not him. I think he dies before they conquer him. And then it has belly and thighs of brass, which is the Grecian Empire, which then conquers Medo-Persia. Then we have legs of iron, which is the Roman Empire, which conquers what the Grecian Empire was left of it. And then we have the feet of part of iron, part of clay, as the last world empire is still headed by Rome, the Vatican. But it's mixed with clay where it's not as strong as it once was. It's partly strong and partly weak, and we can kind of see that being played out today with what's going on in the world. I'm not going to get into detail on that so I don't get flagged and taken down. But anyway, Nebuchadnezzar made a statue completely of gold in defiance of this, and told everybody when they hear the music playing, they got to bow down and worship the statue. This is the mark of the beast. This is what we're told about in Revelations chapter 12 and 13 about an image being made of the beast and everybody being forced to worship it or they'll be put to death. That's the same thing with Nebuchadnezzar. If you didn't bow down to the statue, you'd be put to death. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were 3 Hebrews, 3 Jews, and they refused to bow. And they even told the king to his face that, hey, whether God delivers us or not, we're not bowing down to your statue. So he throws him into the fire. And guess what? Jesus is in the fire protecting them, and they are not burned by the fire. Yet the people who threw him in died just getting too close to the furnace because of the heat thereof. But where's Daniel in all that? Well, Daniel represents the church, taken up, protected, while all this is going on. While the time of Jacob's trouble is going on, Mark of the Beast is coming out, Daniel's fine. He doesn't have to worry about it at all. Unless you're trying to say he was bowing down, worshipping the statue so that he wouldn't die. No, he did not do that. Because he represents the raptured church, not here. Now, there's probably a few more instances of that going on. I'm trying to think real quick of the Old Testament before I move on. But there's not one that's really coming to me at the moment. But the next one is Jesus himself. After he rose from the dead, many others rose from the dead with him. I don't know if the dead were with him for the 40 days or what happened, but they seem to be testifying for a little while anyway, how they were raised from the dead, and Jesus still preached for 40 days after he rose from the dead. And then he was taken up to heaven with those who rose with him. And that is a depiction of the rapture, because what happens after that? Well, Rome ends up besieging Jerusalem. And when that happens, all the Christians got out of Jerusalem because something like the emperor got sick or the emperor died. So for 5 months, the Roman armies just kind of stood by waiting. So all the Christians got out of Jerusalem, and all that was left there was the Jews, Israelites, the Hebrews, those who did not believe on Jesus. And then Rome besieged Jerusalem. It got to a point where people were eating each other's children and eating their own children because there wasn't any food, and then they weren't going to surrender. And then eventually the Romans came in, killed off a lot of people, and just destroyed the temple, where one stone was not left upon another. And that's where we are today, where there's no temple there. There's actually a mosque on the Temple Mount. And you can pretty much say that that is a abomination of desecration right there, putting a mosque on the Temple Mount. You can take it that way. Some people do. But anyway, that's just something to use to get into an actual date of the rapture. And I'll actually do that for the end of the video. But there you can see again another depiction of the rapture as Jesus is taken up. Then destruction comes upon Jerusalem. You also focus on 70 AD. The Christians leave, and then destruction comes upon the Jews. It's by the Romans, right? So we see all that being played out over and over again. It is a constant witness for us. But let's take a look here at something. When was the mosque built on the Temple Mount. I think it's like 638 or something like that. Let's just go with the first date we see. 644. Okay, that's what we're gonna go with. So, what people do is they go, okay, this mosque here at the Temple Mount. That is another fulfillment of the desecration, the abomination of desolation. There we go. Spoken of by Daniel. And it's supposed to be something like 1260 prophetic years after this that something's supposed to happen, right? So if we add 1260 days to this, what do we actually get to? We get to like 1800, 1904. Wasn't that about right? And then there was a prophecy. It's in Daniel, at the end of Daniel, chapter 12, the final verses. Talks about the 1290 days and 1335 days. So let me just bust out my calculator here, because I don't want to think about numbers. So let's do this. We got 644 plus 1335 equals 1979. So yeah, those numbers are in the past, obviously. So their theories are obviously wrong. But I like the idea. I like where they're going with it. But we know the one that actually is the abomination of desolation actually comes into the Jewish temple. It's not he builds a temple on the Temple Mount to a foreign god, is that he actually goes into the Jewish temple claiming to be God. So anyway, I just thought that'd be a little fun to do at the end, because I heard some people talking about that. Kind of interested me a little bit. So here we just kind of cleared that up. That's assuming that was the actual date. I'll do a little more research to see when the actual date was. But as far as I know, that's the date. 644 is when the mosque was built there on the Temple Mount. But anyway, that is that. Thanks for watching and take care.